Hey, I'm Dietec, and I like to modify computers, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a custom GPU backplate. A lot of times your graphics card won't even come with a backplate, and that is certainly the case for this 970 that I'm going to be modifying today. Other times your graphics card will come with a backplate, but it's just like a plain black piece of metal, and it does cover up the PCB, but you could probably make your own custom backplate that looks cooler than that one anyway. So I'm going to be going through a few different methods, starting with the simplest and cheapest way to make a GPU backplate and graduating to more complex and expensive ways to make even more awesome backplates. Eventually leading up to including LED strips inside of your backplate so that whatever designs you decide to make light up. And in case you're one of those people that like to see things in writing, I will be including small descriptions of each step in this video in the description of this video, and all of the tools and materials that I use to create these mods will be listed as well. So obviously the first thing we need to do is figure out how large our backplate needs to be by measuring the graphics card. After that we can take our 3mm thick acrylic, which is the material that we're using for all of these graphics cards, and cut out our measurements. Now the first method I'm showing off is the cheapest and easiest way of making a graphics card, so I bought this acrylic cutter for like $2 off of the internet, and that's what we're going to use to cut it. You're going to want to score down into the acrylic multiple times until you get about halfway down into the thickness of the acrylic, and this usually takes me about 4 or 5 passes. After that, it should break off exactly where you scored it, so put it on the edge of the table and apply sharp pressure onto the area you're trying to cut off. If you scored it deep enough, it should snap off cleanly. Now that our backplate is cut to size, we need to make it look cool. I have a sheet of vinyl here that I'm going to be cutting into strips and then sticking those strips onto the backplate in a cool design so that when I paint it, I can peel those strips off to use as a kind of stencil for making my design multicolored. I've been asked if it's possible to use other things besides vinyl to use as a stencil, such as sticker paper or painter's tape, and you could use that stuff, but I've always had the best results using vinyl. If you use anything else, the paint could bleed under it and make your lines not very sharp.
Sugar in your voice, dear, black pepper in your touch, and I have always loved too much.
As for painting, you can use any paint that says that it sticks to plastic and that it's non-conductive. I just use Rust-Oleum enamel paint because I can find it at my local hardware stores, but it's not necessarily the only paint that you could use. Now, whatever color that you want your vinyl design to be, you have to paint the back of the acrylic panel that color. That way, when you peel off the vinyl, it'll be clear and you'll be able to see through to that color. Then the second color that you want, you can paint the top of the backplate over the top of the vinyl stickers. I happen to use black and blue. And trust me, wait for this thing to dry for like 24 hours after you paint it. Otherwise, if you mess with it before then, your chances of messing up your paint job go way up. And you can see that once I peel the vinyl stickers off, it reveals the blue underneath the black. And that is the simplest and cheapest version of a backplate that you can make. Now, if you want to get really artsy, there are other methods that add some really interesting effects to your backplate, but they also add complexity and cost. So my suggestion would be, if you're interested in just making a backplate by itself and no other mods to your computer just because you think your graphics card looks ugly, just stick to the first method that I've already shown. But if you're planning on fully customizing your entire computer and you're going to buy some of the tools that I'm about to show off anyway just to complete those other mods, then you can justify these extra expenses a little more because you'll be able to use them with other mods as well. So what I'm doing here is marking out an acrylic design that I want to eventually cut out and then add to the back of my backplate just to add some depth to the decoration. If you have a jigsaw just laying around like the one that I showed about 30 seconds ago or so, you could use that to cut out your acrylic designs, although I definitely prefer to use a scroll saw instead. You'll be able to achieve much more detailed cuts with the scroll saw than you would be able to with a jigsaw, so if you're going to be picking up a tool to use for PC modding, definitely go with the scroll saw. If you are doing a multiple layer design on your backplate and you want all of your layers to be different colors, you have to paint them all separately and then attach them together later. Also, it takes a really long time to cut out intricate designs into vinyl with only a razor knife. So if you're going to be modding your PC a lot and making a lot of vinyl stencils or designs, go ahead and pick up a vinyl cutter to do the work for you because it will save you a lot of time. To attach your painted layers onto your backplate, there's a couple different methods you could use, one of which is this acrylic cement. This stuff is really nasty and it will destroy your paint job, so only use this to attach to your backplate if your backplate isn't already painted. If it is already painted, you could just use VHB tape, which is just this really thin double-sided tape, and I'll be showcasing that later on in the video. What I'm doing here is covering up the already fully cured paint job that I did the night before, just so that when I attach it to the backplate and then I paint it black, I won't be covering up my green paint job with black paint. And as you can see in this clip, the acrylic cement is melting away some of the paint that's on the side of these decals. That's not a huge deal because when it dries you can just scrape off that ugliness with a knife, or you could just leave it there and paint over it later on with your separate color and you won't be able to see it anyway.
Up too down late, drinking all whiskey. My knees are all crooked and you're stop by taking my lead. I play that screeching fiddle all night long. I wrote 13 notes.
In this next backplate, I'm going to be showing off the real power of a scroll saw when it comes to cutting out designs, and I'm also going to be showing you how to add LEDs to your backplate so that your design lights up in whatever color you want it to.
I see you out turkey everywhere I go. Canada's so dry. Bring on.
Now with your scroll saw, you can absolutely plunge cut into the middle of your backplate so that you can cut out a design without coming in from the side, but it does require you to drill holes inside of the lines of whatever it is you're trying to cut out. You'll be threading your scroll saw blade through these holes so that you can reattach it to the scroll saw and then start cutting in the middle of the backplate. Now, in order to backlight your design, you're going to need 2 layers of acrylic, the back layer being the one that the LED light actually shines through. Keeping that in mind, you're going to have to make the back layer a little bit smaller than the front layer just because you're going to have to fit an LED strip at the top of your backplate and you need to make room for that so it's not sticking out. Now I'm going to be painting both sides of this top layer so that the LED strip behind it won't shine through the paint. If you only paint one side, oftentimes you'll be able to see your LED strip shining through your paint job. I actually show off what this looks like later on, and there are multiple ways of fixing that problem, but painting both sides is definitely one of them. Now since this thing is already painted, I won't be able to use the acrylic cement that I used earlier, and instead I'm going to use VHB tape. This stuff is actually really strong, and it's a safe bet to think about this as a permanent solution. If you use a decent amount of tape like I'm doing, and you try to pull apart these 2 acrylic panels after you've already taped them together, it's actually pretty likely that the panels themselves will break instead of the tape giving way. Now that you've attached your 2 panels together, you need to have something to put behind your design that will help reflect the light from the LED strips and distribute it evenly throughout your design. The best and cleanest looking way of doing this is just to use white paint, but I've already showed you what that looks like earlier in the videos, and so I'm going to be using white vinyl instead. Of course, the risk of using vinyl is if you don't apply it properly, you will get some air bubbles stuck behind your vinyl in between the vinyl and the acrylic sheet. And you probably always will be able to see those air bubbles just forever. So now I'm going to be showing you all of the materials that you need to assemble your RGB LED strip. Now I'm going to be soldering this RGB wire onto the LED strip, but if you don't have a soldering iron, I will be linking in the description a wire very similar to this, the only difference being it has a little clip on the end of it so that you can just clip the RGB wire onto the LED strip and it will power it, no soldering required. But if you do want to solder it, it's really straightforward. Just solder the black wire to the 12 volt connector, the green wire to the G, the red to the R, and the blue to the B. Now you have to attach your LED strip to the back of your backplate so that the actual LED diodes on the strip point into the clear acrylic panel. I just angle the strip very slightly towards the panel that it's supposed to shine through, and then I attach it with just some hot glue or some vinyl stickers. Once that's done, connect your RGB wire to your LED controller, then your controller to your DC Molex adapter, and then the adapter to the power supply. To get your newly created backplate to stick to the back of your graphics card, you just have to use some of that VHB tape that I was talking about earlier. Just put some on 4 corners of your graphics card and stick the backplate right on. If you didn't buy any VHB tape because you used the very simple backplate method that I showed first in the video, just go to Home Depot or something and pick up some mounting tape. It's essentially the same thing, but it's a little bit thicker. None of that tape is conductive at all, so it's completely safe to use on your graphics card PCB. Just don't use too much of it because only a very small amount will be effective in holding your backplate on, and you don't want to use too much because you don't want to have too hard of a time taking it off if you ever need to. Now this last method of backlighting your graphics card is a little bit cheaper in that it doesn't require any fancy cutting tools, so you could just use your cheap acrylic cutter to cut out the panels and just a razor knife or some scissors or something to cut out a vinyl stencil, similar to what I did with the very first backplate of this video.
Way down south, somebody Mississippi calls my name. Way down south, said the Mississippi calls my name. Take me back to the place where I first saw the light, to the sweet sunny south. Take me home. Take me back to the place where I first saw the light.
Once you've got your design painted onto the front of your panel, make sure that there's no paint overspray on the back of your panel because it needs to remain clear for the light to shine through. If there is some paint residue on the back, just wipe it off with some isopropyl alcohol.
Georgia and Louisiana, yeah, you're home to me. Way down south, said the Mississippi calls my name. Way down south, said the Mississippi calls my name. Way crossing Appalachia, waiting for the Mississippi across this lake.
As you can see on this backplate, because I only painted one side of the acrylic instead of both sides, some of the LED light is shining through the paint job where it's not supposed to be. To prevent this from happening, like I said earlier, you can paint both sides, but that's a little bit tricky because you have to make sure that behind your design doesn't get painted because that needs to remain clear so the light can shine through. So instead of using paint, I usually just use a piece of black vinyl and I put it on the back side of the front panel right next to where the LED strip is. That effectively blocks the light, but I wasn't able to do it on this backplate because it was already too late. I already taped the LED strip on. So instead I just put it on the front. It still demonstrates that the light is blocked.
Way down south, said the Mississippi calls my name.
So hopefully at this point you understand basically what it takes to make your own GPU backplate. This is potentially one of the easiest mods you can do to your computer, so if you've never dabbled with modding before, this is where to start. Although, as you saw, it could get pretty complicated if you want to go that route. So as I said earlier, I've wrote a description of all of the steps that I took in this video, as well as made a list of all of the materials that I used. And if anything was unclear to you, feel free to leave a question in the comments section, and I will try my best to get back to you with an answer. Anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more modding content in the future, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next one.